Hello, everybody, and welcome to Silence to Speech. We're here to look at silence to speech, which is actually closely based on a book that I take a lot of my teachings from. It's by Knight Thompson's Speech Work, and so I wanted to share this because I'm really excited about the tenets that they put forward. So this is my opportunity to share with you some of the great stuff that is in this book called Experiencing Speech. So Silence to Speech is intended as a prequel, if you like. That's my word choice, a prequel to learning accents. And these workshops that I'm doing here in this group are a series based on the tenets, like I say, of Knight Thompson's speech work, as laid out in the book called Experiencing Speech, a skills based panlingual approach to actor training. And throughout this, I'm going to be inviting you to answer questions as I go along and also to practice some of the exercises as well. So let me tell you a little bit more about what these workshops are about. So we're going to cover the skill building that is needed before adding the complex acting task of learning and embedding accents into a performance. And before we integrate those skills, we need to ask ourselves some tricky questions. And those are, what are my default speech choices? That's one. That's kind of a rather complex question. But a more simple question might be, what is speech? So in these workshops, I'll be asking you to examine speech from a place of conscious curiosity, step by step on a journey to what we can confidently term speech. So I invite you to explore the following exercises under what Knight Thompson's speech work call a veil of ignorance. So, a veil of ignorance is basically asking you to forget what you know, to fight that natural impulse to draw conclusions or seek simple answers, and remain in a place of exploration and curiosity, as you likely were the first time you learned a language. So, silence, as you are probably aware, is the complete absence of sound. Okay, so most definitions will tell you that silence is the complete absence of sound. So, my first question is, where is silence? Okay, we're coming to this project with fresh eyes, ears, mouths, and hearts. So, I'm starting with this question. We know what silence is, but where is silence? So now you can grab your phone and you can type that in. As you can see, we're waiting for responses. Where is silence? Yeah, silence is in a vacuum. Space is a vacuum, right? That's where silence is. It's beyond this planet, and it's in between all other planets and places, right? This is the only planet where we know there is life. I'm sure there are other planets far, far from here where there is also life, but wherever there's life, as far as we're aware, there is sound. And silence is beyond here, right? Because we are never in a place that is silent, right? There is always some kind of sound, even if it's your own heartbeat that you're hearing. So we're never in a place where there is silence. Okay. So we know that silence is the complete absence of sound. But what is sound? To oversimplify that, sound is a type of energy that is produced by vibration. And when an object vibrates, it causes movement in the surrounding air particles, which is why in space, nobody can hear you scream because there's no air particles. There's no particles close enough in order to vibrate each other to cause sound to exist. So these vibrating air particles, they create sound waves. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, we're entering autumn, or some of us call it fall. To those of us who love summer more, the most dreaded sound is that of a leaf hitting the ground. And as subtle as it is, that act of the leaf hitting the ground creates a sound wave that travels through the air, flowing in an undulating pattern. Now, you may have heard the philosophical question: if a tree falls in the forest and there's nobody around to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, don't be too quick to answer that, because for centuries, philosophers have been teasing our intellects with such questions. And of course, the answer does depend on how we choose to interpret the use of the word sound. If by sound we mean compressions and rarefactions in the air, which result from the physical disturbances caused by the falling tree and which reverberate through the air with audio frequencies, then we might not hesitate to answer, yes, of course it makes a bloody sound, right? But, this word sound is used to describe a physical phenomenon, of course, right? The wave disturbance. But sound is also a human experience, which is intended in that question, right? Because if there's no one around to hear it, if that's how you define sound, then it doesn't make a sound. It depends on your definition. Okay. Now, it's a human experience when it is the result of physical signals delivered by human sense organs, which are synthesized in the mind as a form of perception. Whichever interpretation we go with, the primary mechanism that hearing individuals use to interpret sound is the ears. Now, sound waves enter the ear canal, hit the eardrum, and three tiny bones. I wonder if you can remember what they are. I wouldn't if I didn't have it written down in front of me, but those three tiny little bones, the smallest bones in the human body, the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. Each one of those not much bigger than a grain of sand, right? Usually no bigger than like 3 millimeters. Those then connect to a seashell-shaped, try saying that after a few pints, a seashell-shaped repository filled with fluid and hairs, which then, that's the cochlea, and then that sends sound signals down the auditory nerve to the brain to be processed. So, sound. But for hearing individuals, this is a key means of experiencing the world. All the beeps, the rustles, whooshes, and hums, these are a constant part of our soundscape. which carry important intellectual and emotional information, from the sound of your phone alarm waking you up in the morning to that of the last distant car engine to drive past the end of your driveway before you fall asleep. That is the audio backdrop in front of which we play out our daily lives. Now, if you feel comfortable doing so, close your eyes so as to focus better on the auditory information coming to you for the moment. And let your attention be in your room within those four walls. And listen. What do you hear? You don't have to type this answer in, just answer it for yourself. For now, keep your observations to yourself, but interrogate the sounds in the room rather than just labeling them by their sources. For example, you might hear something that you could identify as an electric fan. But before you reach the conclusion, oh, that's the air conditioning, or oh, that's the fridge, try to describe the actual sound that it's making. And be creative in how you describe them. Do you hear a whirring? Maybe that's my computer fan. I don't know. Maybe it's yours. Do you hear a chugging thump? A high-pitched hum, perhaps? Just listen, just to the sounds that are inside of your room where you are now. Now, after you've listened to the room, keep your eyes closed, if they are already closed, and expand your attention to include other parts of the building that you're in. What do you hear? Now, after you've listened to the building, expand your attention to include sounds that are outside of the building. And again, what do you hear? Don't know if you can hear that. I'm not sure if that's a screeching cat or I'm not sure what that is. Some kind of wild animal. So now come back into the room and listen to the sounds inside of your room. What do you hear now? All right, now open your eyes Just as all of these sounds are shaping your current experience, an actor's voice shapes the experience of an audience. The voice is a remarkably complex and powerful instrument capable of flexibility and fluidity. Now, when I say it's an instrument, yeah, your voice is an instrument. And I don't mean that metaphorically, I mean it literally. Because just like any musical instrument, the voice has a power source, an oscillator, and a modifier. So let's explore that a little bit now. Think of a musical instrument and then type here the power source of that instrument, the oscillator that it uses, and a modifier. So let me give you an example. An acoustic guitar. The power source is the plectrum, plucking the strings, right? That's where the source of power comes from, the energy put into plucking a string. And then the oscillator, or oscillators in this case, are the strings that vibrate, right? So an oscillator is something that vibrates. And then the modifiers are the strings being shortened by the fingertips on the fretboard. Okay, so I'll give you a minute or so to think of some other musical instruments and just put what the power source is, and the oscillator, and the modifier. And just think of one example of a musical instrument. It could be one that you play, or if you're like me, it could be one that you've seen people play. So yeah, we've got clarinet. Yeah, so the power source for a clarinet is the air. That's right. It would be the flow of air, right? That is blown into one end of the clarinet. And then the oscillator is the reed that is in the mouthpiece of the clarinet. And then, of course, the finger holes that are covered, the number of finger holes, that would be the modifier. Exactly. That's it. Now, let's consider the power source of the voice. What is the power source of the voice? Yeah. Somebody else said in the comments, they put trumpets. The power source is our breath blasting through. Oscillator is our face pillows or lips. And the modifier is our keys or finger smashing. Yeah. So actually with the trumpet, yep, the power source is the flow of breath. The oscillator is actually the thing that vibrates. Yeah, that would be the lips, right? So the lips trilling at the mouthpiece, right? Because those are causing the vibration, which then causes the sound. Then, yeah, you're right. The modifier is whichever keys are being held down to alter the shape of the cave within which the sound is vibrating, right, from your lips. Well, if you are the one playing the trumpet. Yeah, exactly. All right, so where are we? What have I got up here? Yeah, power source of the voice. Oh, I have to click on start quiz. I think now you can submit your answer. By the way, if you're watching this and you're wondering how to join the Mentimeter thing, you can just go to a browser and type in menti.com And then you can see the code is at the top of the screen right here. Air from the lungs. The correct answer is flow of breath. So yeah, air from the lungs flowing. So you're not entirely wrong, even though Menti says you are. It's just that your answer is not listed as one of the many possible correct answers. So yeah, air from the lungs flowing. It's the flow of breath that is the source of the voice. Moving on to the oscillator. What is the oscillator of the voice? Or in other words, the thing that vibrates. Oh, sorry, I've got to click start quiz. Sorry. In order for you to be able to submit your answer to the question, I have to click on start quiz. My apologies. What is the oscillator of the voice? What is it that vibrates? There we go. We have an answer, and it is a correct one. It's not an entirely accurate one, but that's okay. And the reason for that is that they're actually called vocal folds because they're not string-like things. They're not really chords at all, right? They are they're more like, fleshy sort of things with a blade, kind of blades on the edges that vibrate together. So they're not like the strings of a guitar, right? Which you might think of when you think of a chord as being like a string-like thing. So it's more accurate to describe them as vocal folds. So the modifier of the voice. What is the modifier of the voice, or the thing that shapes the flow of sound? And I click the button so you can answer now. It says everyone has voted, but let's see here we go. The correct answer is the vocal tract. Even though it has marked your answers as incorrect, mouth, tongue, lips, teeth, face, tongue and lips, you're absolutely right. It's just that these are just a part of what modifies the voice. So those answers are all correct, but the all-encompassing answer is the vocal tract. And I'm just going to bring up a picture of, I have it under good authority. This is the vocal tract of KTS. So if you look at their vocal tract, you can see that it goes all the way from here on the left, from the nasal opening through the nostrils, all through the nasal cavity, all the way back here to the nasopharynx, right down into what we could term the throat, right? Right down here towards the the voice box, within which is the larynx, right? But also there is the oral cavity as well. And as you're right to point out, yep, it includes chambers within the bones of the face, right? The zygomatic bone, there's the nasal bone, there's various bones, the maxillary and the upper, where the upper teeth are housed, right? Of course, there's the jaw, right? Or the maxilla, and there's, sorry, the maxilla is the upper one here. The jaw is also called the mandible, right? So all of these things, and as somebody mentioned, the lips as well, of course, that is part of the outer part of the vocal tract. Everything basically from the face, going all the way back through the nasal and oral cavities, right the way down through to the vocal folds. That entire thing is the vocal tract. And there are many things that are involved in the modification of the voice. So it's the flexible tube. Basically, the vocal tract is the flexible tube that is the distance between your lips and nose and your voice box, right? The modifier shapes airflow into a variety of pitches in vocal communication. Our vocal tract shapes flow into a wide variety of sounds that we call speech, right? So that wide variety of vocal tract shapes, that's what we're going to be focused on from here on in. So what makes up the vocal tract itself? Well, muscles, bone, connective tissue like cartilage and tendons, and lovely mucous membranes as well. Now, I invite you to check in with your body and make any adjustments that you might need to be more comfortable. And let's begin with our eyes closed and our jaws relaxed, or as we now know them, mandibles, right? Relax your mandible. You can give it a bit of a massage, right? And keep your jaw relaxed, open, and lengthen the spine. Let your head and neck float upwards. Take a moment to notice what you notice, and bring your thoughts into the room and this moment, the here and now, and consciously turn your thoughts towards observing your breath. So just think about your breath. Don't worry about, I didn't brush my teeth. Just the breath itself. And after a moment, you might notice that you don't have to take a breath or actively suck in air. Your body knows how to breathe perfectly well without you controlling it consciously. Notice your breath's involuntary rhythm. Feel which parts of your body rise and which parts fall as you breathe in and breathe out. And notice whether your breathing in and breathing out create noise or whether they're silent. And now explore what adjustments you might make with your body to make more sound with your breath. How much effort are you using to make more sound with your breath? What's the least amount of effort you need to make more sound? And now let your breath be silent again. And notice what adjustments you might have made to arrive at that silent breath. What did you change in the vocal tract? Which parts did you move or alter in shape to bring it back to silent breath? Think about, where does your breath come in? Is the air entering through your mouth, through your nose, or both your mouth and nose? If your mouth is open, try closing it and breathing in and out only through your nose. And feel that the flow is most likely cooler as you breathe in and warmer as you breathe out. And on the next breath in, tune into the cooler sensation to track the breath's journey into your nostrils and then down into your throat. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Now let your lips part so that you can breathe in through your mouth. And see if you can breathe in only through your mouth. You might need to plug your nose to do so. You might not have to. And again, use the air temperature to observe the sensation of the breath through the vocal tract, keeping your nose closed. Inhaling, feeling the cold air, then exhaling the warm air. And now try breathing through your mouth and nose at the same time and notice how different it feels. Okay, so here are some questions for you to reflect on. Think about what you might engage to change the breath port of entry. If you didn't use your index finger and thumb to block off the nose, then what did you use in order to bring in the breath just through the mouth? And how did you change that? What was it that altered? What moved in order to bring it in just through the nose? And what did you alter to bring it through the mouth and nose? Also, does one feel more comfortable for you than the other? Do you have a preference? Are you a mouth breather? That's okay. No one's judging you. Was your breath silent or was there some sound? So these are kinds of questions that you can ask yourself. I don't need you to put those on a self-addressed envelope and send them to me. This is just for you, some things for you to think about. This is part of the inquiry, self-inquiry, if you like. All right, so let's see what happens when we increase the breath flow. So in your relaxed, comfortable, easy breathing position, start to bring in more air on the inhalation and release more on the exhalation. You don't have to follow my rhythm, just at your own pace. What did you change, if anything, about your mouth or throat? If you're sounding a little like Darth Vader, then this noisy breath is caused by air bouncing off the surfaces of the vocal tract. Can you increase the airflow without changing anything in the mouth and throat, or even tensing anything? Because maybe your first impulse might be to work from a place of strength or force, right? But with practice, you'll be able to focus the effort where it needs to be and let everything else, like your vocal tract, your shoulders, your chest, stay relaxed. Because rather than muscularity, it's more about balance and finding the pathways to achieve that balance, right? You can call this isolation. It's a kind of isolating a particular muscle to move a particular part of the vocal tract. And we do it all the time, of course, when we're talking. We do it at lightning speed, right? As we're speaking the words that we speak in our language or languages. But to be able to isolate them and control them, master them fully, that's another skill that needs to be learned through practice. By the way, breath going out is called egressive breath, not aggressive, but egressive, right? So when you exhale it, like most of the sound, well, actually all of the sounds in English tend to be egressive, right? And breath coming in is ingressive, right? So there are languages that have ingressive speech sounds as well. So they make those sounds by breathing in the air. So here are a few points to consider. One is that breathing occurs almost constantly, and it's usually without sound. Usually, right? I mean, if you snore at night, that's obviously something getting in the way because it's relaxed and it's obstructing, or partially or completely, the flow of air. Another is that breathing continues its flow without any conscious effort, but we can also control that flow and decide when and how we breathe. Another is that air moving through a tube, such as the vocal tract, doesn't create a lot of sound unless the air is moving quickly. We can create noise whether we're breathing in or breathing out. However, it would be very limiting to communicate with other people if control, if it's about controlling the length of the hiss and noise from our breath stream, right? If those were the only ways to make sound, then it would be very difficult to communicate that way because we need more tools to create sound. Of course, we need the voice. So we've got our power source, which is the flow of breath, and we've got the tube that we can use to modify that flow, which we call the vocal tract. And now we need the thing that vibrates, the oscillator, which are the vocal folds. And sometimes you can hear these, people refer to them as vocal cords, like we saw earlier. But it's, like I said, it's more accurate to call them folds because they're actually a couple of folds of flesh rather than a pair of strings. So now, if you were to place your fingers on your throat and feel around for the shapes and the textures that you might notice slightly hard protrusion in the front of the throat floating near center. And that's actually part of your larynx. Which larynx is the anatomical name for the voice box, right? And people use the terms like Adam's apple, or you want to call it the Eve's apple, whatever. But, all bodies are different. So gendering those shapes isn't really always very helpful. So we'll just call this the laryngeal shield because it acts like a shield. It protects the rest of the voice box. So laryngeal shield. Now, we could spend a lot of time exploring the various components and how they all fit together, but there are two primary components, and those are the thyroid cartilage and the arytenoid cartilages. And the protrusion that you can feel at the front of the throat is the thyroid cartilage. And like I say, it's a shield-like structure that protects the windpipe, and it provides an anchoring point for the vocal folds, which meet in the back of the windpipe, and they can come together or apart. Now, we're going to start next week's workshop with a closer look at the larynx, and then we're going to start to explore the voice. But in the meantime, I've got some homework for you. Don't worry, it's not hard. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paste the link below in the comments to a video in which Knight Thompson Speechwork demonstrate how a larynx works using people as the constituent parts. It's a lot of fun, right? So I'll paste that down there in a few minutes. And hopefully I'll see you next week where we can start to explore the voice. Now, if you enjoyed this, then please share it with others and invite them to the group so that they can join future workshops. And I look forward to seeing you next Sunday. If you're watching this on a replay, then make sure to watch any others that follow after this. The more interest I get, the more likely I am to continue doing these. So for now, goodbye, everyone. and I'll see you soon.